Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Gavin Fish. This is my channel. I appreciate you taking some time to stop by as we continue our discussion about the death of Ellen Greenberg, the 27-year-old school teacher from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who back in January of 2011 was killed in her apartment by being stabbed 20 times. 10 stab wounds in her back, the back of her head and neck, and 10 in her chest. And inexplicably, the medical examiner ruled her death a suicide. So in today's video, what we're going to do is, with the help of my wife, we're going to see if it's even possible, physically possible, for Ellen to have committed suicide by stabbing herself in the back of the neck. But before we really get into that, I want to just bring you up to speed on a couple of things. If you're new here, you can go to my website. Let me move myself out of the way there. Let me go in the bottom corner. You can go to my website and click on the cases page, and you will find Ellen Greenberg's photo right here. If you click on that, you will be able to see all of the photos and files that I have compiled, and there are a lot, guys. And this has been thanks to my supporters over on Patreon that I've been able to get these files. So if you want to support what it is that I'm doing here, I invite you to support me over on Patreon. The other ways that you can support me is by subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, and then the other thing that I ask, if you don't like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs down. That way I know the kind of content that you guys would like to see. Okay, so before we get into the reenactment that my wife and I worked on, I came up with a couple of questions based on some of the things that I noticed in the case file since my last video, which I will link below. So if you haven't watched it, please go ahead and go back to that. But I have several questions that I am trying to find the answer to, and I want to clarify before we get to that reenactment. And I actually got some help. But the first one, my first question, or I guess clarification, has to do with Dr. Marlon Osbourne. In my last video, we went over part of his deposition, and part of that deposition had to do with a meeting that he had after he had ruled preliminarily Ellen's death a homicide, and then he had a meeting, and then he changed that to suicide. That meeting was with two members of the Philadelphia Police Department, with a member of the district attorney's office, with his boss, the chief medical examiner, and himself. And in that meeting, he apparently had been pressured to change the manner of death from homicide to suicide. So let me show you the part of his deposition that I want to go over. The questioner, who is the lawyer in this case, Joe Pedraza, says, in your time at the medical examiner's office in Philadelphia up to January 27th, 2011, had you had a similar meeting with representatives from the police department and the district attorney's office to discuss changing the manner of death from homicide to suicide? Dr. Osbourne asks, any case or just this case? And Mr. Pedraza says, any case. And he goes, no, I have not had a meeting to discuss changing. In my last video, what I said was, up until January 27th, 2011, or up until about that time frame, he had never had that kind of a meeting. But the way I read it now, I think he answered it kind of stating that not only had he never leading up to that meeting, but he hasn't since. At least that's my reading of it. And if you guys go over to the website and check the case pages and look at the deposition here, I'd love to know what you think on that. Okay, the second thing is we learned in the deposition, let me get you back over to my screen, that Dr. Osbourne never went to the scene of Ellen's death. He had an investigator do that, and I guess that is pretty typical. The investigator here on this report is a man named Stephen Ozlowski, I believe is the pronunciation of that. And then on another report, it says there's another investigator named Jamie Budd, and they create an investigation report that apparently Dr. Osbourne would look at in order to make his determination, right? To publish his opinion. Now, I had a question in my mind if that was normal for a medical examiner to never have gone to the scene of the death. And it turns out, if you're a longtime viewer of my channel, you'll know that I have a friend who is a medical examiner himself. His name is Dr. Kenneth Clark. He's a quadruple board certified pathologist. He's a forensic pathologist, a neuropathologist, a clinical pathologist, an anatomical pathologist, this guy. And he's worked in the medical examiner's offices in Syracuse, New York, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, when I talk with Kenny, one of the rules that we've established over our time interviewing here is not to ask specific questions about a case. Apparently, medical examiners need to stay in their lane, and there's a certain etiquette. But I am allowed, he allows me to ask him questions that are kind of general questions. And so I asked Kenny, what is kind of the process of a medical examiner's investigation, both on scene at, the crime scene or the place of death and in the autopsy room. This is what Dr. Clark had to say. Can you walk me through just the general process from the time that you're alerted that you have somebody who has died and you need to do an autopsy? Can you walk me through kind of what that process is? Very generally speaking, because I know it's a long process.
Yeah, sure. Assuming you're talking about the process when the body is already back ready for autopsy.
Sure. Well, why don't we actually start a little earlier than that? How about when the medical examiner's office is alerted that there is a suspicious death?
Okay. At least where I've worked, when the medical examiner is alerted that there's a suspicious death, now that's not the only, I want to say this, it's not the only reason we're alerted. Medical examiner's office is going to be alerted for any death that's either unexplainable, sudden, unexpected, or suspicious. So all of those categories can result in a call to the ME's office. One of the things we do, if I get a call at home, from, in one of those cases, oftentimes the cases they look obviously something natural, of natural causes, or maybe accidental. We may not get called at all as a medical examiner, but if we do get called, usually there's an issue or a question of some sort. So we'll discuss it over the phone, and if need be, we'll go out to the scene itself and look at the body as it is.
Now, let me ask you about that part of it, because on TV, we're watching these crime kind of TV shows. It always seems to be the medical examiner who is on scene.
Right.
But in the case of Ellen Greenberg, it's like they had investigators that aren't necessarily pathologists that go out. Do both ways happen?
Yeah. The investigators will go out all the time. It's, the investigator's job to go out and actually do a preliminary investigation on every death, essentially, at least where I've worked. In the case of a homicide or what's suspected as a homicide, then the medical examiner will actually go out and look at the scene, evaluate the body on scene. A lot of this is for medical legal reasons, to be honest. If a case winds up going to court, the fact that I had seen the body as it was and took it through the entire process, including transport, autopsy, all the way up to the final report, as opposed to just getting the body, halfway through the process. It has legal, it offers some credibility to legal testimony, basically.
Gotcha. Okay, so go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, once you've been let's say, okay, you've seen the body, the investigator has gone over the scene and everything. Now the body is back at the medical examiner's office.
Right.
You know, how long does it take as far as the process of actually performing the autopsy?
To be honest, it depends on the case. It depends on the condition of the body. I have done, there are some cases, there's always, every time you start a case, at least this is the way I was trained. You start with some index of suspicion. This is probably a natural case. This is probably a suicide. This is definitely what looks to be a homicide. And that oftentimes determines how much time you're going to spend on the case. It's not to say that some people are less important than others. It's just some cases don't require the level of, from a medical legal standpoint, the level of detail and meticulous care that other cases do. For example, a 23-year-old with a long history of heroin abuse is found dead in his locked residence with a needle in his arm, and there's bags of, empty bags of heroin laying all around. Chances are, and I would be willing to bet money, that this is going to be an overdose death. Chances are, because he's only 23, he probably doesn't have any underlying natural diseases like cardiovascular disease or a previous stroke. So putting it all together, a case like that may take an hour,
Okay.
You just do an external examination to make sure you haven't overlooked something a little more ominous. And then you do the case, you draw fluids for toxicology, and toxicology will tell the rest of the story. Other cases, a complicated homicide and someone who's somewhat decomposed, where it's unclear, maybe there's stab wounds, maybe there's gunshot wounds, something like that could take 8 hours. Something I've done, the longest case I ever worked on was in Pittsburgh. It was about 2 days. It was a 16-hour case because there was so much trauma. There was so many unusual markings. There was a little bit of decomposition, which obscured, some of these things. So it really depends on the case. That's a very long-winded answer, but it's case-driven and it's priority-driven. If an infant comes in and we're suspecting a homicide, a case like that's going to take all day.
And that becomes the priority in
that becomes like a priority. Yeah, absolutely. It's and again, it's not to say that some people are not as important as others. Some cases just don't require the same amount of time. They just don't require it.
Okay, so I think the main takeaway that I got there from Dr. Clark is that, the thing that I noticed is that Dr. Osbourne did not visit the scene of Ellen Greenberg's death. He read the report, there were photographs taken, and then he consulted with police on what they believe happened. So that, and then if we go over to his deposition, later on in his deposition, there is a part where Mr. Podraza asks him, and I've got it highlighted here. All right, so is it fair to say that it's ordinary for medical examiners or pathologists to consider information beyond the autopsy itself? So Dr. Osbourne says, it's not only ordinary, it's routine and customary. Even in natural deaths, we don't take everything by face value. And the examination doesn't necessarily give us all the information. We do request medical records, talk to family about social history. All of those things factor into making the determination. The prevailing idea is that the autopsy may be about 20% of the case and 80% of the case is circumstances. So naturally, since I have a medical examiner that I can talk to find out if he agrees with Dr. Osbourne, I went ahead and asked Kenny that question. And it's important to me because if the circumstances of the death are what is primarily, leads to the opinion of the manner and cause of death, I think it was probably a big mistake for Dr. Osbourne not to be there. Of course, not knowing what Philadelphia's norms are. But let's see what Kenny has to say about this. if I were to take the whole process and divide it into two, one would be like the scene investigation, and then the other part would be the actual body investigation, right?
Exactly.
What is when you're writing your report, how much, if you were to give a percentage, how much of that report comes from the scene investigation, or let's say the ancillary stuff, the non-body investigation versus the body investigation itself? How do you think that divides out?
Oh, it's almost 100%. The report is almost 100% autopsy. That's not to say that we don't consider what has happened at the scene and circumstances surrounding the death, but the report itself is an autopsy report. It's what we found, and it's how we interpret what we found. The one thing, at least where I've worked in Syracuse and Pittsburgh, we will make a brief statement summarizing the circumstances and the scene where the body was found. Well, so usually at the beginning of the report, we'll just recap the circumstances, the reported circumstances, and then we'll also say, the body was found, lying prone with a bullet hole, with an apparent bullet hole in the back of the head, something like that.
So the circumstances don't weigh nearly as heavily as the evidence found in the actual autopsy?
That's right.
And would you say, and this is not a court of law, would you say most pathologists would agree with you on that?
Most would. Now we're talking about the report again. I'm not we haven't discussed the manner of death. That's a different issue. But I think most pathologists would.
Okay. I'm glad you said that. Glad you said that, because when it comes down to it, right, the thing that people like me are most interested in, because we probably just don't understand the body of the actual report, but the opinion down at the end, right? The opinion that would declare the cause and manner of death.
Right.
Is that opinion, I guess, weighted more heavily on, I don't want to lead the question. What weight does the circumstances and the autopsy play, or what weight is given on both sides of those in the opinion that you render?
The opinion is heavily, sometimes even exclusively weighted on the side of circumstance.
Okay.
There's everything in manner of death in the opinion statement. So, essentially what we're saying is, can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Let's just take a garden variety heart attack. People have them all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone was, if I take a guy who was just sitting around watching TV and he has a heart attack and dies, I would have an opinion. I would say, based on the circumstances and the autopsy findings, in totality, this tells the story that essentially this guy was sitting around watching TV and had a heart attack and died. Now, take the same guy and the same heart attack, only tell me that he was in a physical altercation with his neighbor 5 minutes before. My opinion would be, with the same autopsy findings, my opinion would be, well, considering the circumstance, the same paragraph, I would consider this a homicide because he actually had the heart attack in the process of being harmed by someone else. So you can see there that with the same anatomic findings, the same individual, the deciding factor between homicide and what would be a natural death is it's exclusively circumstance. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that's a good illustration. I get that. Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Clark, I'm really glad that he answered my question the way he did, because I actually posed the wrong question. The question was about the opinion, right? And Dr. Osbourne said 80-20, circumstance versus what he finds in the autopsy. So Dr. Clark agrees with him on that and gave a very good example of why that is, which tells me, what I infer out of that is that it becomes even more important for the medical examiner to actually go to the scene and see the scene itself. The death of Ellen Greenberg is it just boggles my mind that this medical examiner called her manner of death suicide. And I feel like had he been on scene and was able to see everything firsthand, not in the form of a photograph and a written report, he may have been less inclined to be pressured by the police and the district attorney's office to call this a suicide. Because I don't know the man's heart, but I just don't see how he can come to that manner of death. And I will get to the reenactment that I did with my wife. We've gotten through a couple of these questions. Let me just go, let me get one more question that I had. And this actually came from viewers. In the comments, I was told multiple times, you should go check out a video that was done by CBS Philly about no hemorrhage in one of the wounds. And I had read the deposition that is talked about in this news report. So I was well aware of it, guys, but let's go ahead and take a look at this news report, and then let's go to the deposition, and we'll go back to Dr. Clark to see what he has to say about it. Here we go.
Eyewitness News is revealing new evidence in the death of a Philadelphia school teacher more than a decade ago. Tomorrow, Ellen Greenberg's family and their attorney will make their case to a city judge to argue her death was a homicide and not a suicide. Matt Petrillo is in Center City right now. Matt, you have some of the evidence that will be presented tomorrow.
Yuki, that's right. You know, if you or I get cut by something, we bleed. It's just a part of being alive. But a medical examiner who reviewed part of Ellen Greenberg's body found something unusual. There was no bleeding or hemorrhaging after some of her stab wounds. Ellen Greenberg was a beloved teacher who worked at Juniata Park Academy.
Ellen was a very, very good, caring person.
But her parents say she had her life cut short at just 27 years old after she was found dead in her Manayunk apartment with more than 20 stab wounds to her body. It happened in 2011. Now, a decade later, Greenberg's parents are still pushing the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office to change her manner of death from a suicide to homicide.
We want justice for our daughter.
So that wound.
In 2020, you might remember the Greenberg family attorney showed Eyewitness News images he says forensically proved Ellen could not have stabbed herself 20 times.
Have you ever been deposed before?
Yes.
Now, this deposition of a city-hired medical expert reveals testimony that corroborates those images, according to the Greenberg's family attorney, Joe Pedraza.
In this neuropathologist's best determination, Ellen wasn't alive when she was stabbed.
The deposition is of neuropathologist Lindsay Emery. She was hired by Philadelphia to review Ellen Greenberg's spinal cord a few years ago. Watch as Emery reveals her findings for the first time to the Greenberg's attorney, Joe Pedraza.
What's significant here is that there's no hemorrhage.
And in your experience, no hemorrhage can equate to the person having been deceased at the time of the administration of the trauma.
Yeah, I mean, in general, no hemorrhage means no pulse.
People without pulses do not stab themselves repeatedly. So that by itself establishes suicide is absolutely impossible in this case.
Corroborates what we've always thought. This was not a suicide. This was a vicious homicide.
And at tomorrow's afternoon hearing here in Center City, a Philadelphia judge could determine if Ellen Greenberg's manner of death should be changed to a homicide.
Okay, so I watched that video that you guys suggested I watch. There were a couple things that I wanted to bring up. Number one, actually, let me just show you, since they looked at some of those computer models of Ellen Greenberg's body. You can find those on her case page if you want to look closely at those. And you can also find the deposition of Dr. Emery down here. So there are a couple problems that I had with that reporting. Number one, I guess there's really just one major thing. And it might just be that they are limited in the amount of time that they have. I thought it was a little bit lazy, but So there are two things. Number one, the city of Philadelphia did not hire Dr. Emery to take a look at Ellen's case. That reporting is wrong. Dr. Emery had been hired as a pathologist in the medical examiner's office, and while she was not doing the neuropathology work for Philly's medical examiner's office, she is a neuropathologist. And so what happened was she was what she described as curbsided. A pathologist comes to her and says in 2019 and says, hey, the parents are asking me about this. I'd love your opinion on it. And she very briefly took a look at it. It does seem like she spent some time. She made some slides. She looked at everything microscopically. She did a histological exam. But so she wasn't hired. I don't want you guys to think that Philadelphia decided to just something out of the blue. They decided to take this case seriously. That did not happen. They just were like, oh, hey, when you got a minute, take a look at this case. Now, that being said, the medical examiner in question here, Dr. Emery, is a qualified neuropathologist, and let's take a look at what she said in her deposition. So Mr. Pedraza asks, regarding the cut to the dura that went into the vertebra that we've been discussing earlier in your testimony, you said that there were two possibilities for why there wouldn't be hemorrhage. I think, and she answers, right. So the main point is that I don't have any evidence of there being hemorrhage in direct association with the injury to that defect. It's a 1.1 centimeter defect of the vertebral column itself and the dura, that there was reaction to it, right? So that there was blood or the ability to bleed as a result of those injuries. She continues, with what I have to examine, I don't see that. So one conclusion is that those injuries happened when the decedent no longer had a pulse. And Pedraza asks her, what's the other possibility? She says, the other possibility is that I can't see, or I'm not seeing that hemorrhage because it washed away during fixation, washed away during the autopsy. So what she said is very important to this case, that they basically, if your body has a pulse, if it's cut, it will bleed, right? And that is referred to as a hemorrhage. And in this case, there was a puncture wound, but there was no hemorrhaging. So that could mean that there was no pressure, there was no blood pressure in her body when she sustained that wound, or that hemorrhage had been washed away, because the dura is a smooth surface thing, so it may have been washed away. So I asked Kenny about that, and let's hear what he has to say. Okay, my last question, and I got permission from you to ask this question earlier. This is I don't want to talk specifically as far as the Ellen Greenberg case, but there was testimony in this case from a pathologist who is a neuropathologist, and I was asking you about this. So let me just set it up. So we're not talking about Ellen Greenberg. Let's just talk about in general on autopsies. If say you get in a victim of, well, somebody who is dead and has multiple stab wounds, and let's say most of those stab wounds have evidence of a hemorrhage internal, right? The blood, pooled at that location, I guess is how I would understand it. And then other stab wounds don't have that same reaction. There's no internal hemorrhage. There's just the evidence of the sharp object going in and out, let's say. What would that tell you?
To me, that would tell me that not all the stab wounds occur not all the stab wounds were inflicted while the person was alive. It's one of the things this is basic physiology 101, that when the heart is beating and there's pressure in the cardiovascular system and that is disrupted, you're going to get hemorrhage. So if you don't have hemorrhage, either the cardiovascular system and the pressure within is gone, or the hemorrhage has somehow been removed, like washed away or something like that, which is unlikely. So generally speaking, if I see wounds without hemorrhage, I usually would attribute that to postmortem wounds.
What do you mean by washed away? Does the body wash away a hemorrhage?
Well, it depends on where the hemorrhage is and what kind. Deep soft tissue hemorrhage, you can't, it'd be almost impossible to wash away. But if you have, for instance, a hemorrhage on the surface of the body, part of doing an autopsy is cleaning things up so we can actually examine things. It would be unlikely, but it's possible that if there was a hemorrhage in certain areas of the body, could be accidentally washed away as part of the process of moving through an autopsy. But it would be unlikely. But it's
okay. So it's not something that could occur naturally. That would be that would be an artifact of the autopsy itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so Dr. Clark comes to the same conclusion that Dr. Emery did, right? That either, and the most likely case, according to Kenny Clark, is that there was no blood pressure when that happened. Now, I went on to ask him about the process of the autopsy, and that complete unedited video is available to my patrons over on Patreon. So if you would like to see the half an hour or so conversation that I had with Kenny Clark about that, consider becoming one of my patrons over on Patreon. But I think that it is a valid point that, listen, if one wound could not have been inflicted by Ellen Greenberg, then that means no suicide. And even in his deposition, Dr. Osbourne agreed with that. Okay, so those are all the questions that I had to go over before I did the reenactment with my wife. So now that I've covered those things, let's just go ahead and hop into the reenactment that Kimberly and I tried to do to see if Ellen could indeed stab herself in the back of the head and neck. Hey guys, this is my wife, Kimberly. YouTube, Kimberly, YouTube.
Hi.
So, Kimberly and I were talking about the Ellen Greenberg case and going through the autopsy. Ellen Greenberg was 5'7", 136 pounds. Turns out that my wife is 5'7", 136 pounds. So we thought that she would be a good avatar for Ellen Greenberg if we were to recreate the wounds that she supposedly made to herself, right? Now, we are much older than Ellen Greenberg was when she died.
She could be our daughter.
Yes. But Kimberly actually has a pretty good range of motion. So we kind of feel like, because of her exercise, the yoga and Pilates and stuff, that if anybody could, she would do it.
Flexibility is there. Yeah,
yes.
If anybody, yeah.
Okay, so love. Let me, she loves this, guys. I want to show you over here. I think we're in screen. Yeah, we're fine. Okay, so check this out. I have printed off the wounds that occurred and their angles. So these are the chest wounds. These are the head wounds, and then I did the ones that had the knife in them as well. So what we've got here, guys, is a stir stick, because I didn't want my wife to be stabbing herself with a knife. So I've marked off the size that, Ellen Greenberg, that basically, this is the handle, and then the other side, it would be the blade. And the idea, love, being that also, because it's a flat thing, we can put it in the right orientation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is you. I think.
Do you want to put it in the right spot, and then will
see if, yeah. So okay, so let's look at. So my thought when I looked at this is that it occurred.
Right?
I think over here first. I think that it went her left to right and around to the front. So. We're not going to get this perfectly, but if we take a look at this one, which is L, it is situated kind of between the ears, closer to there, and it's
Ears.
rather up and down. It's like, it's about like that.
And she is right-handed.
Well, oh yeah, she had a towel in her left hand. So, go ahead and grab that. But it can't be up like that, it has to be like that.
Okay.
But you're holding the blade, so
It
move
needs to be back.
Yeah. Okay, and
And it has to be up
that's-
here.
no, it's upward facing. So, okay, so now you know kind of where it is.
Okay.
You think you can stab yourself like that?
Okay, this, can you tell by my voice, this is a huge effort.
I mean, you're really. I mean, how much pressure can you put on yourself?
From that angle?
Yeah.
Well, and okay.
Yeah, you can stop. Does it feel. Kimberly and I worked out this morning. We're a little bit sore. Okay, so that one seems okay. Now there's one kind of, so it's higher and it's more in the center of the head, so it's like about there.
Okay, getting closer will be more doable. Where, put it in the right spot.
Yeah. Just so if you were to go from the one before to that one, yeah, I don't see that as working. Okay, so that has to kind of turn your head a little bit like that.
Okay.
Okay, let's do the next one. There are two kind of straight in, like at the base here. So like that. If you're going to commit suicide, it seems like an awfully hard way to commit suicide.
Okay, I have very long arms, right? I
Right.
have very long arms, and I do yoga. I can do a bridge and mermaid, and for anybody who knows, you know that I have the flexibility. That is challenging to even get to that spot.
Would you say, I mean, for 46-year-old woman, you are flexible, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. For a 27-year-old woman, would you consider yourself
Yes.
very flexible,
Yes.
right? The average woman would not be
Right.
able to do that.
Right.
Like, there's no way as a 46-year-old man. That is our psychotic dog. Libby girl, come on. All right, well, how about this? Because this is just ridiculous that would ever happen. Well, there are three.
She do it with her left, and then
Switch.
switch because
Pick up a towel.
pick up a towel.
I don't see it happening. What about, like, if we look at her... Okay, so I think you and I both agree. No.
No.
On the back. Okay. What about the front? So, if I recall correctly, this one, I think E, is the fatal blow. And it's sideways like that, and it comes in like that.
It's just weird. If she were right-handed, it would come in from this side. That's coming around here and pulling in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, why wouldn't the medical examiner's office do something like this? Come on. Guys, I think it's obvious anyway, right? It's obvious that Ellen Greenberg didn't do this to herself, but I mean, just try to like.
Okay.
Okay,
So
right hand, just try to stab yourself in the back of the head. You know what I mean?
That's where it puts. Oh my goodness! But I would have to come up here and have.
Oh yeah, your
the
range of
force.
motion has to come from the top.
It has to come from out here. How do you get that from?
Yeah, in order for, so stay right where you are. Let me grab this. So let go of it. In order for it to come in this way, then your arm would have to be pointed back, right? And go as far as you can. Like, yeah, in order to, like when you bend your elbow and make that thrusting move, it has to come from the top, right?
Right.
And then none of these wounds, none of them come at a downward angle, right? They're all coming in straight from the back. So this is what I think. I think an assailant, I'm the assailant, like I'm 6'2". I don't know how tall her fiance was, and you're just wearing regular shoes, little heels.
Yeah.
Little heels. Yeah. So about there, at 6'2", I can come in straight. I can come in straight, like with a stabbing motion. I can come in straight. My belief is that it started over here and it went boom, 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 and he wasn't moving. She was turning this direction. He keeps doing this and then is at, you know, da, 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 like that. That's what I think. But yeah, thanks, love. You too, my lovely wife. Take a bow. Guys, I really want to thank my wife for being so patient. She just does not like to be on camera. That was a big thing. I really appreciate her doing that. And I think that what we knew, we already knew. It's obvious that nobody is going to stab themselves in the back of the head and neck 10 times. But I think it is not mechanically, it's not biomechanically possible for Ellen Greenberg to have done that. I also want to thank, in addition to my wife, Kimberly, Dr. Kenneth Clark for coming on and answering the questions that I had. Guys, if you like content like this, please subscribe to my channel. Please give these videos a thumbs up. Unless you don't like them, then give them a thumbs down. And if you have any comments or questions you want to add to the conversation, please do so in the comments section below. I do want to remind you once again that you can go to my website and see all of the files that I've been able to get. It's 1,991 pages of documentation. So if you feel so inclined to help me sleuth things out on this case, please do that. And if you want to support me, the reason that I have all these pages in the first place is because of my Patreon supporters. So if you go over to patreon.com/GavinFish, I'll put a link in the description below. For $3 a month, you can help me out. I would really appreciate it. So I think with that, it is time to bid you adieu, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to my channel. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below.